live and recorded for future replay. I want to thank the folks at Lunenburg Public Access for their hard work on this. I'm going to, I do not have a chair's report this evening. So the first piece of business we have tonight is the committee had asked for a discussion regarding turf versus sod field construction and what the ramifications were in terms of long-term use and maintenance. And to begin that discussion, we've asked the landscape architect to provide us with some additional information. And if Mr. Warner, you'd be willing to come forward and begin the presentation?
Yeah, happy to, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the board. We do have a plan that's going to be showing up on the screen here momentarily. But thank you for inviting us. With me tonight is Jared McGonigal from my office, and then there's a couple of gentlemen here from a company called AstroTurf. They're a company that that sells and installs synthetic turf. So Dave and Bob here from AstroTurf will be able to answer any detailed technical questions that you might have about the product, so that we can answer hopefully any questions that you might have. Specifically, to start off with, though, we understand that there's some concerns about safety with regard to the materials themselves. So I wanted to share with you a couple of pieces of information. If I walk away from the mic for a moment, is that okay, or should I?
You can take it with you.
Oh, great. Okay. So, and I think most of the concerns stem from the information that's been heard on the news about the different types of infill products that are used in synthetic turf. While I talk about this, Dave, can we just take out a sample of the turf so everybody can see that? I might just set that on the table up front, and I can refer to that. Thank you. So let me just set this up here, and you can pass that around. I'm sure that the kids in this area have been playing on synthetic turf in other communities, right, as they go and play sports in other neighborhoods. But that sample that you see there has the traditional crumb rubber, which is installed into the turf fibers to give it the impact attenuation for safety, as well as the surface upon which the athlete's feet are running on, and it gives you the performance for footing and for ball control. These are a couple of samples here. This one in particular shows the crumb rubber material. It's comprised of recycled car tires, and what you've heard in the news, I think NBC has been one company that's broadcast a lot of information on the subject, is that there's questions about the chemical composition of that. And when it's tested and broken down in a laboratory, it has chemical compounds in it that are pretty scary when you hear about what's in it. The reality is that there's been a tremendous amount of testing on how it's used in these fields and in other applications. It's used a lot in gym flooring, it's used a lot in other types of products, and repurposing the material for consumer goods. That it's been determined by Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, California health departments that have all done their own testing and evaluation on it to not have any risk to children or adults when they're using the fields. I just wanted to bring this here. I think it may have been distributed by email prior to this meeting. Not sure if it was or not, but this is a PDF. We have a PDF of this, and it can be circulated. That's a document that came out last March from the Department of Health here in Massachusetts that went through extensive analysis and evaluating it and came to the conclusion that it's safe. Now, we understand, though, that there are still people that have questions and concerns about it. So I'm not here pitching or selling that idea that you have to that's the only solution. There are a lot of other infills in the market. This is one in particular that's basically an acrylic-coated sand. Oh, the state of Connecticut also had a report that was in February of last year. I can pass that around. So, and then Dave was nice to bring this other sample here that shows, well, not sample, but box that shows a myriad of samples. The industry is really reacting to this with a lot of different options, but there are pros and cons to all of them. And some of these, for instance, like organic, the plant-based product, which is cork or coconut fibers, that opens up a whole nother question. Like, that material is also going to have to be tested, and it's coming in from farms in other countries, and what kind of chemicals are being used, in growing of those crops. So I think the good news is that the attention that's been put on this subject, that any product that would be installed in the field would be perfectly safe for use with sports, and that the testing is available to verify that it is indeed going to be safe. So that was the first thing I wanted to touch on with regard to synthetic turf, because I know the decision to go from a sodded natural grass field to synthetic turf could potentially have that as a concern to begin with. I don't know if you have any particular questions about this that we might be able to, either I answer or the people from the industry here that are closer to this than I am, to put your minds at rest.
Any questions from the committee?
With regard to the infill material.
Does it need to be replaced or redone at any point?
Well, the different types of infill all have, like I said, pros and cons. The crumb rubber is what is most widely used in the industry. In fact, Dave, you were mentioning a quote to me earlier, was it about 80%? 85% of their fields are still using crumb rubber as the primary infill. And that's one of the main reasons, too, about that is it's extremely durable. I mean, the molecular design of the rubber is designed to wear for 60,000 miles on a car or truck tire on the road. So it's extremely durable material. From a replenishment standpoint, that if there is a little bit of track off on shoes and that sort of thing over time, periodically, probably, I'm not sure what the return cycle on that, but every 4 years or so. I was going to say at 3 or 4 years, but there'd be some top dressing and replenishment there. Now, other products that are out there, like there's EPDM. That's a virgin rubber material that's shredded or ground and produces a crumb as well. There are concerns about the UV stability of that and how that might hold up, and after a period of time that starts to break down. So the crumb rubber is more durable than that for certain, and so the organics can tend to compact a little bit. And of course, due to their nature, they're plant-based. I think the term organic might seem a little bit misleading in a sense. We all use the term organic when it applies to food, and it makes us feel good because we're eating something that's good for us, right? But really, these are plant-based products, I guess I should say. Coconut hulls, rice hulls, that type of thing. And but those will have an inherent tendency to break down over time as well, due to their nature. Very durable pieces of plants, but they are still plant-based and they can break down. So yes, replenishment of infill is required at different frequencies based upon the product. Crumb rubber is one of the most durable options.
Mr. Chair? So this sampling of 12 different items other than the crumb rubber that's in there and in the bag going around, do you, A, have fields that are made with these? Are they out there? And if so, are there any health concerns by any organizations about those? And B, what is the pricing difference between all these 12?
I think on both of those points, Dave might be able to speak to it better than me, but I know AstroTurf does have other fields with some of these different types of infill, like the EnviroFill or TPE.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Dave Wheaton with AstroTurf. Those samples that you have in front of you there are all products that I have personally installed in my region. I manage the Northeast. Many of them are in the greater New York City area. The EnviroFill products, the acrylic coated sand, is a staple of the New York City Parks Department, who is the largest purchaser of synthetic turf in the country. That is one of their standard infills that they use. Flex Sand, another one, is one that had been used for the Parks Department. They are actually no longer in business. TPE is a virgin thermoplastic elastomer product that is fairly popular today as far as the alternative infills go. Because it's a virgin, no heavy metals or lead materials in it whatsoever. It's extremely expensive. That is a staple for the New York City Public Schools specification. So all their new fields today utilize TPE. EPDM is popular in there's certain markets that really embrace alternative infills more than others. Los Angeles County Parks, this Unified School District, New York City, City of Newark. And then there's a lot of individual towns, private schools that have kind of gone on a alternative infill kind of a kick, if you will, researching and doing more. They all have pros and cons that go along with them. From a pro standpoint, they all perform pretty admirably. The problem with a couple of them, the TPEs and the EPDM, is that it's a fairly broad category, if you will. And they're all relatively new, really in the last probably 5 to 8 years for just about every single one of them. So the long-term effects and studies of how well they last, how well they perform, hold up, they're not fully kind of vetted at this point. Some of the products come with an extremely high price tag, so it could add, the TPEs, for instance, could add $200,000 to the cost of the field above crumb rubber. Crumb rubber, the typical crumb rubber, is the least expensive. So from an economic and from a durability standpoint, it's your best option. We're actually recycling, taking it out of the old field and putting it back into the new one on some occasions as well. So it lasts. From a price standpoint, they all the alternatives do come with a higher price tag than crumb rubber, just so you know. So there's limited pockets around the country. Each region addresses or feels, has different opinions, thoughts and ideas, and a willingness to spend additional funding to pursue an alternative infill. And as David said, you know, the science is still out a little bit on some of them, how long they will hold up and last. From a quality standpoint, the TPEs can vary. You have to be very careful where you source the material. We've had a number of fields in the United States that have failed. These were Chinese products that were put in. So you have to be careful with a lot of this new stuff where it's actually sourced. But for the most part, any of those, and if you want, I can, at some point after the meeting, I can give you a list of where they're located if you ever want to go see. The organic material that David was talking about, we just installed at the Groton School nearby here. So you could actually, that's probably the closest one you could actually.
So any health issues on those other items, like there are some, you know, just some reports on the crumb rubber?
Yeah, none at this time that are, they all have their little quirks. The EnviroFill is a little firmer, a little more abrasive, might feel a little bit, play a little bit different underfoot, provide different ball bounce. Some of them require the addition of a pad underneath the product because they don't give you the same impact attenuation that David was talking about. So like I said, they all kind of come with their, the good and the bad. But as far as health concerns go, there's none that have been noted for any of those products.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
So I have a few other things I'd like to talk about with synthetic turf, and Dave showed you a pad. So, and the fact that like the EnviroFill, which is a acrylic-coated sand, does indeed require a pad underneath of it because it doesn't have the same impact absorption that an infilled or a rubber infilled field would have. Impact attenuation is really critical for player safety, and what a pad does on any field, regardless of the infill, it provides insurance essentially against the low maintenance that might incur. And we've seen a lot of these synthetic turf fields. We've designed and installed quite a few ourselves, but we've also looked at a lot of them throughout the Commonwealth that other municipalities have installed. Maintenance is something that, I mean, when communities switch from a natural grass field to synthetic turf field, and I have a spreadsheet that I'm going to hand out in a moment, there's there's obviously a lot less maintenance. You don't have to mow it. You don't have to fertilize it, you know. So the tendency is to actually not groom it as much as is recommended, to redistribute the infill. The infill only performs consistently if that infill is uniform across the field surface. And at high wear areas, when infill gets displaced, if you don't have a pad underneath there, then you're going to have less impact absorption and a real source of potential for injuries. Historically, the test method for safety on synthetic turf fields has been a term or testing method, ASTM testing method called GMAX. And that is really just dealing with the athlete falling on the field. But there's another aspect to safety now that has been used for many years in the playground industry that's really catching on in the synthetic turf world as well. It's called HIC, or head injury criteria, and a lot of the injuries we're hearing a lot about in sports now, concussion, it's been around forever, but we're hearing a lot about it recently because there's a tremendous amount more knowledge about it and how to protect the children when they're out there playing on the field if they do have a concussion, to get them out of the game, allow them to recover. But preventing that in the first place is something that the industry is really moving towards and recommending. Even with a pad, concussions will occur, but the severity of them can be significantly reduced and the frequency of them can be reduced. So that's really what a pad offers. And so I wanted to show that to you because I think when you're considering a synthetic turf field, you should really be considering the entire system, you know, from the base all the way up, and the pad is definitely a recommended component of the entire system. So I'd like to pass out this spreadsheet, this one sheet, if you don't mind taking one and passing it down. One of the things we were asked to talk about is the cost, which is very real, weighing upon the town's mind as to what is it really going to take for us to go from what we own now in the contract, which is a sodded, irrigated, natural grass field. You know, you've got all the amenities there, sports lighting, you've got the bleacher and press box, parking, and it's close to the right at the high school, so you have all the facilities there. The thing about a natural grass field, it only has a certain amount of wear capacity to it. The amount of use that you can play on that field is limited because of the inherent nature of the natural grass, as well as the weather conditions. Is there an extra copy there? I gave them all out. I want to be able to read along thank you. So the way to explain this is the first third of the sheet, as you read across, is the construction value. We have the actual values from Shawmut for the field as it's in the contract today in the top right. And then in the top left is the approximate, and I say budget value for synthetic turf because we haven't gone through the process with you yet of defining exactly what you want, what you need for synthetic turf. Infill, pile height, pad, no pad, that type of thing. So we've made the assumption here of a 2.5-inch fiber height with a sand and rubber infill, much like you see in this box here, with a pad underneath of it with these numbers. And of course you need the edger and then the drainage system, and we've also factored in a piece of grooming equipment which is necessary to provide the recommended maintenance on the field to redistribute the infill. So that gives you a construction cost. You look at those two first highlighted numbers, that's comparing the synthetic turf field approximate cost to the natural grass field with a premium of about $500,000. The next third of the page, the middle third, is looking at the maintenance. So on the left we have the annual maintenance for synthetic turf highlighted there and then multiplied out over 8 years. The reason why we did that is because the warranty on synthetic turf is 8 years and so sometimes they'll last longer, 10, 12 years, but we're looking at the 8-year warranty period for this and saying, okay, what is the cost per year or per use? And that's jumping to the bottom of the page. But if you look at in the middle, the $84,000 for maintenance is over 8 years. You look in the right middle part of the page, the natural grass field maintenance, we have two different columns there. One is the actual maintenance costs that we've received from the town facility staff. And then we have another column next to that, line by line, showing what we would recommend. So, but we're using, since the maintenance costs that are currently being used on the natural grass fields are in that boxed column, we're using that because that's conservatively low in the comparative analysis that we have at the bottom of the page, and I'll explain that in a second. So you can see that over 8 years, a natural grass field, the construction cost and the maintenance cost for that comes to about $460,000. That's the green box. You compare that to synthetic turf with the maintenance, and again, with all the assumptions that we talked about on the design of the synthetic turf field, comes to about $940,000. Now, the bottom part of the page is really where it gets quite interesting, and it's because we're looking at this from a cost per use standpoint. Of course, with natural grass, you can only play on the field so much, or otherwise you're going to ruin it. Especially if it rains, you have to call off the game, because one game after the soil is saturated can destroy a natural grass field. So if you look on the left part, we're basically assuming, and this is actually based upon the athletic director's existing program, looking out towards 2017 in terms of all the different activities that are programmed for the different fields in town, and specifically what he's going to need this field to be able to do. And the program is currently projecting 2 games per day, at least, on this particular field, and on some days 3 games per day. And a natural grass field is really only going to be able to stand up to about 1 game per day. So we already know going into this that the level of use that's projected on this field is going to mean there are going to be some quality issues associated with natural grass that is going to have to be, the field will have to be rested and rejuvenated in order to be able to recuperate from that overuse. But the bottom of this page is trying to put it into perspective in terms of, if you were to look at this as a pay-as-you-go type of thing on a cost per game, the number of games that you can play on a synthetic turf field is limited basically to the hours in the day and the programming that the parents and the children and the teachers, the athletic director and the coaches are willing to live within. And right now, we're looking at about 3 games per day. This spreadsheet assumes just 2 games per day. So again, conservatively low, projects that out over 8 years, and then takes the cost of the field, construction and maintenance costs, divides it by the number of uses to get a cost per use, to give you an idea of what the value is in terms of cost per play. So that comes to somewhere around $220 per game on synthetic turf, and with natural grass, somewhere around $370, $368. And I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it, because you only have so much land, and the alternative to build another field next to it to handle the use, all of those fields are already programmed out. So what we're saying with synthetic turf, in effect, it's giving you the benefit of almost like having another field, but in the same place, and it's basically how it's programmed. So I don't know if that cost-benefit analysis answers questions that, or helps you understand. What we're trying to do is come in and explain what we understood was your request. If you have any other specific questions about the costs and how this spreadsheet was developed, or maybe I didn't answer your question specifically, I'd be happy to try to answer them now.
Mr. Chair? The construction cost states 90,000 square foot field from established subgrade.
Yes.
I have 2 questions. One is the size of the field, 90,000 square feet. How does that compare with our plan? And then the other question is, with respect to the subgrade, are they the same? And is there any special preparation if we have a pad or don't have a pad associated with the subgrade?
Okay. Well, the first question in terms of size, we have this rendering up on the screen here, and I know it's also being projected for viewers at home. And in the middle of the rendering, you can see the highlighted green field. That outline, it's a little hard to see, but the outline in red is what is 90,000 square feet. That allows up to a 210-foot wide soccer field and a full football field in length with the requisite overrun space. So on the right side, we have a fence and then the 565-foot bleacher system and press box, and that fence comes all the way down to the south end, goes across. In the middle, this is open. We have 2 stanchions for sports lighting in the middle. Those are set back about 15 feet from the edge of the synthetic turf field. The synthetic turf field already has that overrun space within the turf itself, but there would be a concrete curb edger that would be visible in the surface that comes down between the natural grass, separating the natural grass from the synthetic turf. I don't know if that answers your question on field size.
Yes, it does.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
And then with regard,
Clarify, we're talking about a single field.
that's correct. Yeah, 90,000 square feet is one game field. And then we have the practice field over here. That would remain natural grass, irrigated. So with regard to the subgrade, the reason why we made the cost comparison on subgrade was because that's the datum or the baseline that would remain unchanged. So we have all the rough grading that's done out there to establish that grade, all of the drainage system that's collecting the stormwater below the field is going to remain largely unchanged, but the collection system underneath the field itself is part of that cross-section for the field. So that cost for drainage, the under drain system that you see is the 5th line down there, that $200,000 number includes the pad and that underlying drainage system that would be directly beneath the turf. So with a natural grass field, you're deleting the loam. You don't need the irrigation system anymore. So those are accredited back, and that's why we're looking at the net premium to go from natural grass to synthetic turf being about $500,000.
Are there any more
Chair.
questions from you?
Yeah, what is the life expectancy of the field? I know you did it over 8 years, but...
Yes, we used 8 years because that's, again, conservatively low. We wanted to come in here and not pull the wool over your eyes and show you something that's too good to be true. The synthetic turf fibers themselves are the part of the system that tend to deteriorate first, and the chemical formulation in those fibers over the past several years has really improved. The durability of these of the latest type of synthetic turf fibers have really only been tested in advanced or accelerated wear machines. And the industry is expecting them to last longer, considerably longer than the warranty period. Does obviously come down to how it's used and how it's cared for. But with respect to how often, and AstroTurf has been around for a long time, and perhaps Mr. Wheaton would be willing to speak to how long their fields have been lasting between replacements. But we've seen fields lasting well over 10 years in our experience.
Absolutely. The standard industry warranty is 8 years. The 2 factors, the amount of play and ultraviolet light, are the 2 things that primarily break the field down over a period of time. We provide training when the field is complete on how to properly maintain it. We have local service crews that can actually assist you at any time. We're here to try to help you prolong the life of the field and get the most out of this investment as you possibly can. 10 years is reasonable to expect. Over that, there are very few that probably enter the year 12 to 14. We do have 14-year-old fields around the Commonwealth. They are in very difficult shape. Holyoke High School is one, I think, is going on year 15 and will be replaced this year. But for the most part, 8 to 10 years. 10 years is probably, if you properly take care of it, is what you can expect to get out of it.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
So I'm looking at the breakdown, and we're breaking it down because, let's face it, the number comes out good when you break it down by game.
Mm-hmm.
But what you didn't do was break it down by year, which is basically we're paying double per year. So if we're going to look at the cost per game, I guess I would ask, do we charge, and I don't know anybody from, I see Mr. McAuliffe came in, but I don't know if we charge or how we charge. Do we charge for the uses by the game? I mean, is that money that we would lose if we don't otherwise play the games? I don't know how the billing goes for the field right now.
Mr. McCullough, do you have a?
Excuse me.
No, we don't charge by the game. I think that was just a way of determining some way of the cost between the two fields. We don't charge anyone by the game at this point.
Okay, thanks.
And so, yes, it was a method in order to put it into terms for a value, a way of evaluating it.
Any other questions from the committee? With the agreement of the committee, if I could just open it to public questions and comment?
Sure.
So at this point, I can open it to public questions and comments?
Actually, Mr. Chair, can I ask one question first?
Sure.
Do we have a pad on our field, on the existing turf field? No pad? And then what's the life, do you include this in the life expectancy of the field, like an 8 to 10 year life expectancy, or is that something different?
There are quite a few different pads in the market. I brought one that is really the premium product, but that also comes with the best warranty. It has a 25-year warranty associated with that particular pad. So it will go through up to 3 life cycles with a synthetic turf cycle. The other thing about that pad too is that the manufacturer stands behind it with that as a GMAX guarantee as well, and that at the end of its life cycle they have a no-cost recycling obligation. They're committed to a cradle-to-cradle product offering, and so that at the end of its life cycle there wouldn't be a disposal cost to get rid of it.
Is that the pad that was assumed in this model?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Mr. Betancourt, your name and address, please?
Good afternoon, good evening, I'm sorry. Louis Betancourt, 3 Willow Circle. Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate that. And I was at the school committee meeting last week, and let me introduce myself like I did the other week. I am a graduate of the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and I do have a degree in turfgrass management. I spent the majority of my career managing golf courses, and now I'm in sales, dealing with golf courses, landscape, sports turf. And those are my primary specialties that I'm working with. So, we sit here and I'm looking at just at some of the information on their sheet, and the expectation where grooming twice a year, it's pretty standard in the industry from all the people that I've talked to. They're typically doing that twice, every 2 weeks. So, I think that that number is definitely a little low. I know there's concerns about the drainage on the fields. And if we are using native loam to build the field, yeah, there would definitely be some concerns about that. Some of the newer fields that are being built these days will typically have a perk rate. If anyone's done a septic system, you're familiar with perk rate, that exceeds 12 inches per hour. So, that can handle a lot of rain and a lot of water. So, some of these things can be overcome. Natural grass is, in my opinion, and if you ask a lot of people who play, ask the Baltimore Ravens, they're removing their artificial field, they're putting back in natural turf. At the end of the day, I'm not opposed to us having a synthetic field. But, you know, of course, I sat there and I saw the presentation the other day of, you know, 2, 3 total synthetic fields for our town. You know, and the comment of, you know, 3 games, you know, 3 games per day, I mean, or do we have that many sports going on at the same time that we're, you know, that we're getting that much use and play? I know we have a lot of sports in town, between Bengals football, you know, youth soccer, the high school, you know, anything else that we want to do with the middle school. So I think that we have a higher expectation about the amount of use that these fields are getting. You know, real grass can take a lot more abuse and punishment than we're really giving it credit for. You know, some of the numbers here, you know, I don't think that some of these maintenance numbers that they have here, I don't think that they're bad. I think actually some of their maintenance numbers are low, especially if you're committed to having natural turf. I would probably tell you that most people who are professional players would come back to you and tell you that they absolutely would prefer to play on natural turf rather than synthetic. You know, there is a lot of concern about the concussions. You know, and if the turf is not properly cared for, you know, natural turf is not properly cared for, it's going to be like cement. It will be. I mean, I'll guarantee it. But, you know, that can be overcome. So, you know, really just some of my comments. You know, I would love to hear, you know, some of the people on the committee to, you know, if you have any questions or concerns that you might want to ask me, you know, considering my background as a turf grass manager.
Mr. Chair, I have one, actually. When you talk about the perk rate, and the turf can be made to be playable, I guess, in wet weather, can you unpack that a little bit? And maybe David, maybe this is dovetails with you. Would we have to pay if we stayed with a natural field, would we have to pay a premium to get that kind of thing, and how much might that cost?
I can only speak about, you know,
Yep.
with what I'm seeing here. And with,
You mentioned maybe like a soil amendment or something like that, I thought.
yeah, you know, there a lot of fields, not a lot, a number of fields are being built more with a sand base, almost 100% sand base. There is concern there about, because it's a higher sand content, it has a lower water holding capacity, so it would require additional watering for that. It really comes down to construction. If it's properly constructed, I had a gentleman I was trying to bring tonight. Unfortunately, his schedule, he couldn't make it. And this is the industry that he is in. He builds these fields. He works for Sports Turf Specialties. And the owner of Sports Turf Specialties is Dennis Brolin. Dennis is the former groundskeeper for Gillette. This is what he did. He had natural grass and had synthetic. He goes around and he builds these fields throughout New England and even further than New England. So if it is properly amended, you know, with the correct soil, you can get that drainage. The exact specifics about how it's being built, that would be out of my...
I just remember watching Patriots games on the natural turf field. Maybe this was late season, but you just see a real sloppy mess sometimes when, you know, so I just...
And I can speak to that. You can call John Bankston, and I could even put you in touch with him. He's the current groundskeeper. He was the assistant when the Patriots had natural turf. Bill controlled everything, is what I'll tell you. You know, Bill...
Yeah, I didn't want to get an argument.
Yeah.
That's the concern that I think, you know, that we're kind of...
Mr. Chair? How often, on a well-constructed natural grass field, how often would you need to start basically by getting down to the base layer and doing it again? I mean, how many years of playing do you need to basically reconstruct the drainage and the soil and everything?
Okay. From from Sports Turf Specialties, they have indicated to me that the sub-base, not the turf on top, the life expectancy for that would be about 25 years typically, if properly built. You know, again, it always goes back to if properly built.
And then, and then the surface, the turf itself?
That really depends on the amount of use and play. You know, sod can be removed. You know, just that top turf can be removed. New turf can be installed. In the industry, they will, you know, they have football games soccer games at Gillette Stadium. They have soccer games at Giant Stadium. They play those the men's games. They play those on natural turf. They will go in and, you know, they put that turf down. It's merely there for a week, 2 weeks, and they're playing soccer games. The field out at where they just played the Super Bowl, that had been resodded not long in advance of that game. So, you know, these fields can be sodded and people can get onto them very quickly. You know, we're not hosting a Super Bowl here in Lunenburg. You know, these are community sports.
Right. I'm just trying to get a sense from you who have that experience about what comparable costs over 8 or 10 years would be. I mean, how often in that 10 years would we have to resod it?
And you typically probably wouldn't resod the entire field. In front of, for soccer, in front of the goal mounts, that area, you're probably, if properly maintained, you might sod that thing 5 to 10 times a year. I mean, you're probably talking a pallet of sod, you know, and, you know, having somebody come in and do that. At worst, between the hash marks on the football field, there are going to be areas that are going to get worn down. There is a lot of success with overseeding. I would tell you that the number that is on here for grass seed would probably be way underestimated if you really wanted to have natural turf. Because the most important thing that any of these successful sports turf managers is they seed again and again and again, all the time. It's always starting, trying to get growing. The kids get out there. You don't even have to really do anything special. You just need to go out there with a push spreader and push spread the seed over the fields. And then the kids go out there and the kids track that seed, push it down into the ground, and eventually it'll start to grow, you know.
Do you have any experience with maintaining fields at public schools?
Me personally, no, sir.
Oh, but anybody in your colleagues?
Any of my colleagues?
That you would have not, right, that you would have knowledge of what that cost is. That means if somebody in your profession were to say, you know what, if you were going to properly, in your estimation, properly take care of a natural grass field, what would that column that we're talking about, the boxed-in column, what would that really be?
I can get the committee that information.
Okay, that'd be great.
Obviously, I wouldn't have that available tonight.
One other question, Mr. Chairman. I have in my mind that sports complexes like the one down in Lancaster, the soccer complex there, I think that they rest fields. You know, they have a lot of natural turf fields, and there's a couple there that you don't play on for a season. Is that MO in the industry, or in your opinion?
It's typically not for an entire season.
Yep.
I mean, there may be a period of time that and they have the luxury of having a large complex and a large number of fields.
Right, yep.
That they can do that.
Right.
They also have synthetic fields there as well.
Right.
You know, the nice thing about the synthetic fields is because they play soccer there 12 months out of the year, is they're able to go in and remove that snow and be able to get out there and play. I mean, the snow can be removed from a natural turf field as well. You just, obviously, you have to be careful when you're doing that.
Yeah, okay.
And you have to be careful with a synthetic field as well.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, a question, it's probably for Mr. Londa. I know there was some discussion if we do natural sod that we would need additional equipment as to what's proposed on the picture there. If we did the one turf field, artificial turf field, do you think we would still need additional equipment to maintain the natural grass?
To maintain the grass fields, you know, we don't have everything you'd ever possibly want. are fairly well equipped. The numbers that are on the sheet for Lunenburg, those are the costs that I would have if I was running the best program that I've had in the last 18 years. It's not the program we've been running the last few years, but we have equipment that will allow us to aerate fields. We have large-scale mowers that allow us to cut fields fairly quickly. We don't have the ability to bag the grass. If we're going to cut it, we're going to cut it frequently enough to make sure that it doesn't, clump up and lay on the field. So, we have a lot of what we need. We don't have a top dresser, but we're fairly well equipped.
Okay, yeah, just my question in regards, because we would need equipment to maintain an artificial turf field, and if then we needed additional equipment to maintain the natural, then we'd be buying 2 sets of equipment, so.
Mrs. Cummings?
Yes, just, Mr. Londa, would you clarify too, because of these 2 different numbers, I'm looking at this issue, or this concept of seeding. The Lunenburg Way says $288 a year in seeding. The recommended maintenance budget is $2,200. That's a pretty discrepant number. So I just want to find out, Mr. de Bettencourt had noted that he felt that was inadequate. I'm assuming you're meaning the Lunenburg box. Or were you referencing even the other $2,000 for seeding?
I'm even referencing the recommended maintenance budget, that number might be a little low.
Okay. And just one more follow-up, if I can. Mr. Londa, the labor costs are worked into this too. So the assumption is how many personnel in terms of the Lunenburg box?
So the cost per line listed there, I've applied hours of labor. It's not obviously a full person to just take care of one field. And so those numbers were worked in. I did include in miscellaneous, which you'll see is much higher than the recommended. We do all our own internal maintenance on our equipment, which is a lot of hours and a lot of repair parts to keep our equipment running. So that may be a little bit overstated, but I don't think it's overstated in what we spend throughout the year, but per field might be overstated.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Any questions from the audience? Thank you, Mr. Bettencourt. You're welcome.
Good evening, Paula Bertram, 312 Townsend Harbor Road. I have a few questions. My first one is, how many fields do we have now, and how many fields will we have when or prior to construction? How many fields did we have, and how many will we have after construction?
The same number.
Okay, so we'll have the same number of fields. Okay, have we seen a significant increase in the number of games? I know Mr. McAuliffe at the last meeting presented statistics, but did those statistics show a huge increase in the number of games that we expect?
Mr. McAuliffe will have to answer that question.
I think when you asked, how many fields do we have now? Right now, we have 1.
No, I mean prior to construction.
Prior to construction, we had the artificial turf field. We had the football field that was in the present space being occupied by the new school. A large practice area in the front of the new school, and the Oak Ave field that is now part of the school driveway. So we had 3 fields plus a large practice area. Under the new construction, we would have 4 fields, all of which would serve as both game fields and practice fields. And that's really one of our biggest problems, is that there is no place to practice. When we had bad weather previously, we would practice on those other spaces. That large area that was used in phys ed class above the old football field was a large expanse of rough grass that we could practice on there. That was big enough, I would line it for football and other sports that we could practice in without damaging the grass fields. And then most of our games would get dumped onto the turf, the artificial turf field. The schedule I came up with, it most of you have seen, is kind of a typical what we've been going through, and 3 games a day happened several times during the week, as we would have play say on a Monday, we'd play a JV football game at 3:30, and we would follow that up immediately with JV soccer game followed by a varsity soccer game. So we'd be pretty much going 2 or 3 nights a week from 3:30 till 9 o'clock at night with games. And the other times, we're using every space we have for practice. So we have seen an increase. We have, for the last couple of years, sent our soccer teams away over to Camp Low. We're looking at additional teams with middle school sports. We had middle school field hockey for a little while, but once construction started, we had to stop middle school field hockey because we had no place to practice or play. And a number of times, we have several teams sharing a small field like that field just below the artificial turf field and track now. Not a field of any regulation size by any means, but would often have 2 teams practicing there and a soccer team practicing behind the middle school on another space that is neither any regulation size or, it's not even close. So we've been spreading things out for a long time in regards to field use.
Okay. So we've been spreading things out. We had 3 fields. We're going to have 4 fields. I understand we're losing the practice area, but it doesn't seem like there's a huge increase in the number of games. It sounds like we're still going to have to do a lot of maneuvering, but there's not a tremendous increase. Are there any statistics on how many games have had to be canceled because of field conditions? Does anyone? I've heard that playing on a grass field, we have to cancel games, and in the statistics that are provided, there's information about, the cost per game and the number of games that you could gain by having another synthetic field. And I'm just wondering, has there been an increase, an alarming number of games that had to be canceled because of field condition?
I don't have statistics, but on a somewhat regular basis in the fall, we would cancel games on the grass field and move them to the turf field, which meant that we bumped usually Lysa or the Bengals off of the turf field so we could conduct the high school games. As the understanding was that the high school games would take precedent over the other games, which usually would result in a cancellation, not really cancellation, but postponement of games, moved to another date, which would further complicate the schedule. More or less, practices would get knocked out as opposed to games for the high school.
And the last question that I have, I heard the discussion about resodding. My kids played on these fields, my husband played on these fields, and now my grandchildren play on these fields. So I'm very familiar with running from field to field. And in my opinion, they've been very well maintained. I think the school does a fantastic job of maintaining the fields. And one of the questions that came up, or the discussions that came up, was resodding. And I would ask, how much do we, in the years, how many times have we had to dig up the fields and resod them that anyone's aware of?
On our, what was known as the football field, grass field, there was one major attempt at repairs on that field where we debated sodding or reseeding. We cut out the middle of the field during the summer, reseeded that. We had numerous problems with that field as far as being a level playing surface throughout the years. We've done a lot of maintenance to it. It's never been a fantastic field in general. By the end of September, beginning of October, it was pretty much dead. The weeds had died off. The field was mainly weeds in the middle of the field. And the Oak Ave field, none of them were terrific grass fields. There was a lot of maintenance done to them. We weren't working with a fantastic product to begin with because it had been in use for many years with minimal care. So there was stuff done. It was never, I don't think it had been resodded since sometime in the 70s, I believe.
Well, in closing, I would just say a comment. You know, looking at the 8-year cycle cost, you're looking at double the amount, and I'm not hearing a tremendously compelling reason to double the cost to the Lunenburg taxpayer for maintaining fields. We already have a turf field that I don't know where the money's going to come from to maintain. And, you know, I appreciate the fields. I'm there almost every Saturday. I understand that they're important, that the sports program is important to the Lunenburg, and I support that. But to look at this kind of expenditure over an 8-year period, never mind the initial investment, I would strongly urge you to continue with the grass fields.
Thank you, Mrs. Bertram.
Thank you.
Good evening. Dennis Benoni, 635 Goodridge Street. I'm actually on the Parks Commission as well, so I can speak on the Parks behalf. Just a quick background on myself. I worked in the Park and Recreation field for 25 years. I was the Park and Rec Director. My last job was in the town of Sudbury, where we oversaw and built 3 turf fields and have had an extensive park background in field maintenance and grass maintenance. And talk about usage, there was 1,500 kids in soccer alone. So we rotated fields quite a bit. So I just want to speak to a couple issues on, right now, not all of our sports teams are in town. Lycer has to rent fields from other towns to run their program. To me, that's unconscionable in this day and age that our own town team, there is not enough field space in town for them to play. They have to rent fields from somebody else. And it's only going to get worse as we get more kids in town, as lacrosse is coming up now, as other sports start to expand. It's going to be an ongoing problem. I already lived this and went through this as a director in Sudbury. And we went to a combination of turf and grass. I'm not a proponent 100% of turf, but I think in this particular case, another turf field would be warranted. So on the fee structure, we're currently, as a Park and Recreation Department, working with the schools and the local youth groups to come up with a fee structure, whether it is hourly or pay per participant, to handle some of the maintenance, whether turf and or grass fields moving forward. I think the problem with a grass field is you have to put a tremendous amount of money on an ongoing yearly basis to maintain a well-balanced turf sod field. And we just don't have the personnel to do that. And if we outsource it, it's going to cost quite a bit. You've got to slice seed it, you've got to aerate it, you've got to pest management control with turf fields. There's a lot of maintenance, and I agree with the gentleman that this number is very, very low. If you're going to do it right, that's a low number. Just on that other note, I've coached various sports over the years, whether it's youth soccer, I coached at the high school and college level football. When you're asking high school athletes to practice on a field space that's a square, not even regulation field space, whether it's soccer, football, lacrosse, any number of sports, baseball for that matter, if the field is in regulation when you're practicing on it, you're not getting the full effect when you actually play a game. Imagine if you had to teach a child how to a certain football play or a soccer play, and you were only teaching them in a box, and then they showed up on a Friday night or Saturday or Monday afternoon to play a game, and now the field is this big. And that's what our kids go through. My daughter played soccer this year. She had to use a half of a field all the time to practice. How do you get any combination of plays or the full width of a field? How do you tell somebody as a coach, oh, we'll go over there, but really the ball's going to come from that angle way over there? Just the width and the depth alone, spatially, for children is tough. So I'd be in favor of trying to expand field space in town. Just quickly on the last point, just some of the numbers. Did we factor in a well or some sort of water source for the sodded grass fields at the high school? Do we know? I don't know who would ask that. Is there a well incorporated into the numbers?
The irrigation system designed as part of this project has a town water connection from the building.
From the town water fed?
Yes, from the new building.
Okay. And is the cost, do we get charged for watering that field?
Yes.
Okay. What happens if there's a water ban in town and we have brand new 90,000 square feet of sod that we just put in August and we can't water it because there's a water ban? That's a huge issue. Just food for thought. Wells are good, I mean, it's a good offsort, but a well has a certain cost associated with that as well. And then the turf field, I pick on grass fields all the time, is the turf field going to be lined, inlay lined, or will it be just a green slab and we have to paint it? So what's the advantages now? I know that it's changed over the years.
Yeah, so the numbers that I've included in the spreadsheet includes inlaid lines or tufted in and inlaid markings, so they'd be permanent for soccer and football. And that's a pretty typical scenario. Some communities opt to put more field markings in there as well. Tends to get very busy looking, and so we're starting off with a standpoint of some inlaid for the primary sports of soccer and football, and then other sports would be painted. You know, if you used it for lacrosse in the spring, which I know currently lacrosse is played, well, there's a conflict with lacrosse in the existing synthetic turf field with the track being simultaneous, so.
Okay, great. So just in closing, just on the field side, I think it's very important as we all try to crunch the numbers in fiscally. The Parks Department is currently working. We are working on a fee structure to help handle ongoing turf maintenance, grass, if you will, and then also coming up with a solution for the current turf field maintenance and also potentially maintenance of a new turf field moving forward, and how would we fund that over an 8 to 12 year period. On the funding side, when you have a LISA or you have a Bengals, or you have any of the youth groups in town continually get bumped, it's hard to ask them to pay for a field that they may or may not get on a regular basis. And I think if we have field space that's adequate and available, and we can play 2 or 3 games on a given afternoon or a given day, then we can charge for that service and help replenish the turf or the grass fields moving forward. And I think that's the balance of, you know, how do you have a field structure and a fee structure that's comparable to what you have for field space? And if we don't have field space, then we can't charge for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mathieu. Please.
Carol Hatch, 41 Hilltop Lane. My concern is that this isn't a contingency issue. A contingency fund should be for unforeseen costs that come up in terms of the construction of the new school. I'm 100% in support of the new school. I actually stood in this very room years ago speaking in support of the school. I'm an educator myself, and for the past 2 decades since I moved back to Lunenburg, I've been to almost every town meeting, and I think it's unconscionable that the voters who voted for the school and supported the school don't get a say about how the contingency fund is spent. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Luck.
Thank you. Carl Luck, 50 Sunset Lane. I couldn't agree more with the prior speaker regarding using the contingency fund, which was never intended for this purpose, for this. My biggest problem with this is the process that this is. Clearly, there's a lot of issues related to this that the town should have a stronger voice in. This should be something on the town floor that people could discuss and vote on, quite frankly. I think the process of using contingency funds to have the board, who was, you know, empowered to build the school, to make this fundamental decision is just the wrong process, and I hope you don't do that. I think beyond that, there are very serious safety concerns, and that's another thing I think the town should have a chance to weigh in on and do their homework. There's a lot of information that is very compelling that there may indeed be safety concerns and people, particularly goalies, it turns out, and I've seen videos that are alarming of the clouds of this material coming up when a goalie hits the ground and coming up, and they breathe this material in. And I would encourage the committee to go do some of that homework and look at it. It's quite scary. And maybe it's very slow probability, but do we really need that to expose our children to that potential risk? I'd hate to find out 10 years from now that all of the things out there are true. I'm sure everyone on this board would feel terrible if that happened and they supported this activity. So this is just the wrong process. This is not where such a fundamental, important decision to the town should be made. More tactically, on the cost side, since that's what the presentation is, I just have one question. I understand on the maintenance that the labor hours are in the calculation. And I guess my question is, if we reduce this by one field, what real cost do we save? Do we reduce a person? I mean, do we really save that cost, or is this a theoretical analysis, but in the end of the day, you still have to have the same number of people anyway, so you really don't realize the cost savings? So could you comment on that? Is this cost savings real?
Which cost savings are you pointing to?
There's a lot of labor buried. These estimates are of the grass field.
Natural grass field.
Of the grass field.
We'd still have two natural grass fields to take care of if
Right.
we just put one turf field in.
Right,
which I think is what the analysis
I'll
might
let
not
Mr.
be.
Londa speak, but I think he said that the boxed area was for, as best as he could ascertain, calculate for this field alone. But I'll let him speak to that.
The numbers that are presented for Lunenburg costs were with, devoting labor against the various tasks that have to be done here, whether it be mowing, lining the field, putting down fertilizer. And he said, this is representing the best program that I could put together over the last 18 years.
For one
I think the
field.
question-
The reason why I say
Right.
that is that all of our fields don't stand in a vacuum. They compete directly with all of our other maintenance programs, such as our building maintenance. So if I had to spend money on ensuring that the HVAC system at a school works or maintaining a grass field, I have to try to balance those two things because they both have to be maintained. So this is the best program I would
But
have.
the question, I think, is are the numbers in that boxed area specific for this one field, or are these numbers across
It's for
all of
a-
the fields?
It's for a 90,000
It's for
grass
this
field,
field,
one
okay.
grass field.
90,000.
I'm sorry, that wasn't the question, actually.
Okay.
The question was, if we reduce this field, how many people do we reduce our cost basis by? Do we actually?
What do you mean reduce the field?
Means if we made it turf, if we made it artificial turf?
Two.
If we, yeah.
Point
if we-
two is right there.
If we make it an artificial turf and reduce these costs, the mowing, the seeding, all of the labor, do we actually reduce our head count and therefore truly save those costs or not?
I would just say that we're really not in a position to reduce the maintenance staff any further.
So the answer is no.
Right, so we still have a person.
Thank you, Mr. Londa.
Why didn't we say we?
So not only do we have safety issues, we have process issues. I don't think we have a good cost analysis either of what we actually save.
Thank you, Mr. Londa.
One more quick comment on the safety issue.
Mr. Manini.
Yes. Just on the turf side, obviously, there's stuff out there, pros, cons of the rubber and various things. So, it's still out there. But I just want to let you know on the natural grass side, there's still concerns there. On a turf side, turf is different than just, and the gentleman could speak to it better than I could, but a truly sodded field has to have well-maintained fertilizer, water, as we talked about, and pest management. So that all comes with a certain amount of risk as well, especially at a school field. You have to post things, you have to flag things, you have to keep people off. A truly well-sodded, irrigated, drained field needs just as much chemicals as, it's just, you have to really maintain it, and that would be one critical piece. So to weigh the safety issue, I think you have concerns on both ends.
Thank you, Mr. Manini. Sir.
Good evening, Dave McDonald, Island Road, Lunenburg, Mr. Chair, Committee, thank you. First, I just got a couple of comments to make, and then I do have to go, but when you do a project of $70-something million and go through this whole process, it's a lot of work, and you guys should be commended for what you're doing. This is a tough project, and I watch at home and I see where the taxpayers' money's going, and I feel kind of bad sometimes when people say there's different pockets or whatever. Budgets are the budgets. But you're at a situation now where the town approved a project back a couple years ago and you have the contingency money left over. And the contingency money can be spent wisely, or it can be spent foolishly. If you look at the plans what the town approved, they approved a set of drawings with a specific specification. I see on the contingency you want to spend it for different items or whatever. And I agree with a lot of the comments here. It should go back to the town. It should go back to the town. People say, listen, none of the contingency money should be spent until it's approved by the town because it's their money. I know that 72% of the people supported the school, but 100% of the people are paying for it. And that means a lot to me. So I think when you sit back and look at what you have for your contingencies or the fields, there's a good comment. You're paying $1 million for half a field, the way I'm looking at it here in the audience. That's up to you. That's up to go out and get some more information and find out what's good for the town. I'd like to see you guys look at all the contingency, put it on a town meeting, and let the town people vote for it. There's contingency, there's budget, and then there's a dream. And I think, hopefully, your dream came through. Mr. Macklin, I'm very proud of what you did for this school and for the town of Lunenburg. But let's finish it up right. Let the people decide what the contingency should be and should be spent on. And also, I just want to put a plug in for Mr. Powell for donating $40,000 worth of materials to the school. That's a true citizen of Lunenburg. So again, thank you guys.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bertram.
Just one last comment, and just to reiterate, as I've said to all of you, and you know how I feel about the contingency fund, I think that there are certain items that should be incorporated. I think moving forward with the electricity and making sure that things are wired and piped for long-term range plans is great. But I also think that items are left off the capital plan regularly, and you all are aware of that. What we're talking about now are capital expenditures that should be voted on by the taxpayers. And when looking at this cost analysis that's on this sheet, not only are you looking at the initial cost, but you're looking at the long-term cost. And frankly, I don't know where the town of Lunenburg would get this kind of money to replace a turf field at $1 million in 8 years. I don't know where that would come from. The taxpayers supported this project, but to put this type of burden on them moving forward, I think would be wrong. And again, I urge you not to go ahead with the turf field. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there another? Okay, I'd like to, we've been on this subject now for about an hour and 15 minutes. So if this could be, if there's somebody, unless there's somebody with a burning comment or question, please, sir.
I'll make it quick. Tanner Cole, 563 Massachusetts Avenue. I've actually been taking care of the natural fields at St. Bernard's High School since 2001, so I've got a little bit of data that would help with some of this discussion. But first, I have a few questions about the cost analysis. And the first one is, it shows synthetic turf playing 9 months out of the year. And I don't know if Mr. McAuliffe could answer this better, but that's an awfully long season, it seems to me. Do you play in December?
We start in March, and yes, we have played in December, but generally we start in March with spring sports. In fact, just last week, before the snowstorm, there were kids out there using it for lacrosse practices. From just some of the kids at the school, but generally we start with our spring sports season in March and we finish up at Thanksgiving or occasionally into December when we have football playoffs.
Okay. But it'd be fair to say you don't have 2 plays per day for the entire 9 months?
No, we hit that model I drew up on field usage, that is our end of August through the first week of November is when we hit the maximum usage on that field. The spring used to be very little, LISA, but now we have lacrosse, 4 lacrosse teams in the spring just at the high school, and more teams on the way with a youth program. But the bulk of our usage of those fields is from the last couple weeks of August through the first week of November, and then football continues on through Thanksgiving.
And then it was mentioned earlier that the natural fields that we've had previously have never been rebuilt, and I think that's one of the key things that this analysis doesn't really pick up on, and that is at the end of the 8 years, you're not going to rebuild the natural turf field. You're just going to keep maintaining it. Versus the synthetic field, you have to completely replace and start over. So I think this cost analysis really should be updated so that as you pay this thing forward, at year 10, you replace the synthetic. At year 10, you don't have to replace the natural field. And then at year 20, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure AstroTurf would recommend replacing the entire drainage substructure to the field as well. So essentially, you're starting over with that. And one of the issues that came up earlier was rotating fields, resting fields, and things of that nature. Based on my experience, the best thing that we've found is to use the sports schedule to rotate the high traffic areas out of the playing surface. So for example, if you're playing soccer on a field in the fall, you wouldn't play spring soccer there. You'd play something like lacrosse and move the goal areas around so that you're keeping the high traffic areas out of play to the best extent possible. As far as rest goes, I mean, it's great to be able to look at it and say, oh, we're going to take that field out of rotation. But more importantly, I think if you plan accordingly and schedule things so that you don't put all the high traffic area in the same areas all the time and have kids practice shots on goal off the side of the playing surface, maybe yet set up a practice area for that can really reduce those costs. As far as Lunenburg's costs for the natural turf, that's pretty much in line with what we experience with our contract with St. Bernard's. Roughly speaking, we are charging them $6,000 per acre to maintain that field, mow it, water it, start the irrigation, fertilize it, blow the irrigation out, take care of clay surfaces on the baseball fields. All of that soup to nuts is about $6,000 per acre. We have a well there, so we don't pay for the water. So if you backed out the water out of this equation, you'd come in almost right on at $6,000 per acre. And there was another comment about pesticide applications on turf. What we've done, and it's worked out really well, is we just don't spray when the kids are in school, point blank. So we do all of our weed control, insect control, grub control midsummer. Kids aren't using the fields. You make those applications, you shut a field down for about a week, and then you're all set for the year. Do you get weeds in season? Sure you do, but not to the extent that you need to stop playing on the field. So, hope that was helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for your comments, your questions.
Mr. Chair, the article that was given to us by AstroTurf for us to look at, if we can get those, I don't remember seeing those, so if we can get
Right
those
here.
emailed to, no, I know.
Yeah.
But email
We'll
to us.
make
so
a
that we all get
PDF
it.
and- yeah.
That'd be great.
And Mr. Larson, thank you for your presentation. There's a lot of good information. I think that people have a better idea of what long-term costs are and the cost comparison. We appreciate it very much.
Okay, thank you. If I can just collect the samples that I've left up on your desk while you go on, I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
I see that. Did you spill it, Greg?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, meeting minutes from our January the 13th, 2016 meeting. Were there any comments, revisions? If not, I'll take a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Monthly invoices. Who's going to be presenting monthly invoices? Ms. Knox? Please.
Okay.
This is Inga Knox from Jocelyn Lesser and Associates, our project management firm. I'm just introducing you.
Hi. All right, so if you turn to page number 11, we have 3 invoices for this period. One is construction requisition number 18. We have a invoice for owner's project management for Jocelyn Lester and V5, and an invoice for construction administration for the architectural services from Taipei Architect. The construction requisition total is $2,406,165.85. The owner's project management services invoice totals for $52,500, and Taipei Architect's invoice is total for $84,642.20. The total is $2,543,308.05.
Take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved.
Are they coming down?
Mr. Mackin has them.
Why don't we start at your end, with Mr. Bittner. Okay, monthly approvals, change order number 8 for approval. Can you be presenting that?
I'll just say quick and then Jonathan will continue. If you turn to page 19, this is where the summary of the approvals. Also, I distributed a separate page for...
It's coming down.
As a replacement for page number 22 that has descriptions for each change. There was a printing issue, so it's a little bit...
This is Jonathan Hurst, Showman Design and Construction.
So change order number 8 included 3 potential change items that had been presented, I believe, last month at the committee's meeting. Change item CR 031, which was our response to request for proposal number 5, which added a touchscreen station for athletic archives. At a previous meeting, we were directed to separate out the kind of infrastructure costs, so the electrical, data, and millwork costs that would be difficult and more costly to perform after the building was done. And so the total cost of $5,385 is for that work. Does not include any of the software or the screen itself.
And just to update the committee, the school leadership is still looking for partners as a fundraising possibility for the addition of the software and the screen itself.
The second item in change order 8 is change request number 72, which was our response to request for proposal 21. This was asking for a change to hardware and security wiring to be able to lock down doors B127A and B127B. The contract documents as entered into had no remote locking capabilities there. The cost you see for $8,812 is limited to the electrical and security wiring. The costs for modifying the doors and the additional hardware that was required were able to be absorbed in savings in the buyout in those line items at the GMP. So we had surplus money that was in the line that we were able to use to offset that cost. So the $8,812 is strictly for the wiring cost. The last item is change request 73, and this was our response to architect supplemental instructions number 31, which integrated the walk-in refrigerator and freezers in the cafeteria kitchen into the building automation system, which was, I guess, brought to the team's attention that the insurance requirements for the town required that those walk-ins be monitored remotely 24/7. So this was some
Rather than
additional...
just a local alarm.
Correct. If there's a malfunction and they're not cooling, rather than come in Monday morning and find that you've lost all the food, someone will know immediately. So that cost was $2,802, and that's for the wiring and the control module to integrate it into the building automation system.
Any questions for Mr. Hurst?
No, just to clarify, clarification, please, Mr. Mackin. Actually, with regard to the touch screen, the recommendation in addition that you have from the administration is that since that goes hand in hand with the programming, that this item be removed at this time for consideration too, because we're considering all different kinds of options for this as opposed to a touch screen, and that's what the software that was already removed was designed to interact with. And so we're recommending that this be removed at this point in time until we find alternatives with regard to that touchscreen too.
I'm sorry, so the electrical work should be removed?
This added touchscreen should be
No,
removed.
this is just
The title is incorrect.
If you look in the
Okay.
parentheses,
All
it says
right.
millwork and electrical is the only thing
Yeah.
that's being done.
No,
That
we-
line item was 22,000 or 21,000.
Right, because that was already approved. So this does not,
But this is the official part of that.
Right, we were
Right.
directed to perform the work
Yes.
at this price. We had not offered it as a
okay.
change.
But just, then this does not include that touch.
It does not include the
It's only
touchscreen, it does
the
not
work.
include the software,
Okay,
which we are looking for alternatives for.
right, okay. Sorry for the confusion.
I do have a question regarding how the information is archived. So it will be able to be accessed through a computer, not just through the touchscreen? So if I wanted to go online...
That's what we're working on. That's what we're working
The scenario in
on.
my mind is there's going to be somebody standing there working the touchscreen, there's going to be 5 people beside them on their cell phones doing the same thing
Yeah.
that could be done with the touchscreen.
Yeah, we're looking at alternative solutions.
I mean,
Right.
everybody has a touchscreen in their pocket at this point, so...
What we wanted to ensure was the availability of power and data.
Right.
So are we not making any kind of vote on that tonight, or...?
We're voting on the money that we had previously authorized, now as a part of the change order. Because remember, we previously authorized this work. And now we're making this part of a change order, which is just the electric and the data that will go for that, and the casework change.
And then, excuse me, Mr. Chair, Mr. Erickson had mentioned that maybe we could separate these out because I cannot support that, but I can support the other two. So if we do the change order as a total, I don't want to vote nay as a change order as a whole. I can't support CR 031, but I can support CR 72 and 73. So do we vote on them individually, or are we voting them all as change order
This
number
is
8?
a change order.
Then-
So you'll have to make your vote based on that.
So, Mr. Chair, if I might, and this isn't a question for Mr. Hurst, but more a comment.
Sure.
I think we're trying to draw a line in some cases between necessary and nice. And sometimes it's an easy call, and sometimes it's a difficult call. And I think we've had some dialogue about the touchscreen to say that that's a nice to have. That said, if there's a way, some other way to fund the touchscreen outside the scope of this project, then having the infrastructure to accommodate it is what CR 31 is about. I think it's pretty clear to me, at least, that CR 72 and CR 73 fall on the side of necessary rather than nice. But I share your concern that CR 31 kind of ties in with the touchscreen system itself. So that one's less clear to me, I guess, is my point.
And again, I'll remind the committee that you've actually approved the expenditure of this money. This is just the change order that...
I voted and opposed to that.
I understand.
I'm just trying
That's what I was going to say, is that the minutes should already show that when we initially approved this work, you voted against it.
Correct.
At that time,
But I
so.
also will vote against it now, but I don't want to vote against CRO 72 or CRO 73. So
I understand.
If that's the case, then I
understand.
can't support any of them.
I understand. Okay, is there a motion?
Move to approve change order number 8 as presented.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye. Opposed.
Thank you. Just, again, we want to just keep an update on the things that we've been looking at. I wanted to let you know that the school committee accepted the donation from Powell of the work related to the outdoor classroom. They are going to be doing all of the site work, which includes the placement of the sitting stones, building of the actual platform for the teaching wall, and the placement of the Rosetta compass in the middle of the classroom, which will contain a project that the middle school is doing for a time capsule. And we're again want to gratefully acknowledge the Powells for that donation. This evening, we'll be looking to ask the committee for an authorization to proceed with an item based on a cost estimate, which is not to exceed the cost estimate. And what this is the relocation of existing mural and digital mural reproduction. As you know, we've talked about this for quite some time. There is a great desire by both the students, the school, and members of the community to maintain some of the legacy of the original high school by moving the murals from, moving one mural, that is the Whalen Park mural, to the new school, and to digitally reproduce a couple of other murals. I believe we're 3 other murals?
4, I think, were
4 other
selected.
murals to the new school. Again, this is not a request for change, it's an authorization to proceed. Did anyone wish to speak to that other than what I've said? I'll take questions in a minute. I think I've covered it. Have I left anything out that needs to be covered?
Cost?
The cost to that is $15,000. And that's a not to exceed. We expect it to be lower. Are there any questions on that? Seeing none, I'll take a motion.
I think there's some questions from the floor.
We're in the middle of a motion. I'll take a question when we're done.
I'll make the motion for the purpose of opening the discussion that we approve CR 59 in the amount of not to exceed $15,000.
I'll second that.
Discussion.
I probably can't support this at this time, just due to the price. I think we can archive the reproduction, and I think we can do it at a later date, so I don't think that the cost supports the benefit.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to hear from the members of the public.
Yes.
Carol Hatch, 41 Hilltop Lane. I graduated from Lunenburg High School in 1973. I believe there is a mural from way back then. I also was an employee of the school when the Whalen Park mural was painted, and it's really awesome. But again, I would recommend, I agree with you, that we should take a picture of it and the decision should be made by the voters. and again, been supportive from day one, but it's a contingency plan. And also just want to further add that it's a new school, a new generation. They get to make their memories too.
Thank you. Any other?
Paula Bertram, 312 Townsend Harbor Road. As someone who graduated from college with a fine arts degree and who is currently a practicing artist, I understand how important it is to preserve art. But what you're talking about doing is digitally taking these pictures and then digitally reproducing them. Again, I think this is something that, yes, we should do whatever, and I don't necessarily oppose moving the Mural Park mural. I think moving one piece of the mural makes sense. But the other images that you're talking about digitally reproducing, I think that you should take the images so that they can be preserved, but this should go before the Capital Planning Committee. Thank you.
Can I just ask what the price would be for what the difference is in just relocating the Whalen Park mural and not reproducing the other four? I'm sure there's an expense in taking those pictures too, because I know they're in a narrow hallway and there's a whole bunch involved in that, but
Right.
can you separate
the
that out?
actual cost for digitally capturing them is a fairly small amount.
Okay.
We're talking a photographer, in-house photographer and his equipment for a day. Wouldn't expect that to exceed $1,200 out of that total.
And just to clarify for anybody who hasn't been following along all the time, the plan is to actually relocate the existing Whalen Park mural.
And
The
that
other
is
four would be a digital reproduction of what's there. So what I'm asking is how much of this $15,000 it would cost to just move that Whalen Park mural.
Right now, our estimate is about 2/3 of it is for the physical relocation, and about 1/3 of it was for the digital work.
Thank you.
Mr. Luck.
Carl Luck, 50 Sunset Lane. I appreciate the two prior alumni standing up, and I understand there's some outcry for this, but I would suggest, and I'd further like to thank Mr. Powell for his donations, and I would like to suggest that this is another prime case for being able to do that. If the old alumni and people want to do this, then it's a great fundraiser, and I think we should stay off the slippery slope of just having these nice-to-haves that maybe can be funded other ways and preserve it. Great idea, preserve it and fund it some other way. Don't use the contingency fund for something that's not contingency. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Dave Rogers, 82 Highland Street. I would like to propose a compromise situation and make it a win-win for everybody. And by that I mean, I think that this would be a wonderful undertaking for the Lunenburg Historical Society because they have quite an extensive collection of memorabilia from Whalen Park. And if they could somehow or another integrate that into the Historical Society, it would be a way to preserve it for the community and also to save some money that I feel desperately needs to be saved. With regard to the gentleman's response, total cost $15,000, approximately $10,000 to remove it, approximately $5,000 for another expense. I wonder what kind of bidding process goes, and if this is just to the existing contractors on the site, and if they just, go out for competitive bid, because I realize I'm not a contractor, but $15,000 seems to be an excessive amount of money. Along that line, and I know that it's not part of this discussion, but nonetheless I would appreciate it if, as we go on, if someone could explain to us the process in terms of the bid. I mean, $8,000 to secure 2 doors to lockdown seems to me to be very, very excessive. $5,000 to provide electricity and data to a particular site with the idea of potentially having something added onto it, again, seems excessive. And I just wonder how this is done, if it's just, if it's a competitive bid or we use a process that I don't know about. Thank you.
Mr. Hurst.
We're bound by Commonwealth of Massachusetts regulations as far as performing public work, which requires that all work be paid at prevailing wage, which is determined by the Commonwealth. All the work that's included in any change order is documented by number of hours to perform the work and the actual materials. We do use existing subcontractors. We do not put work out to competitive bid for small change orders, but everything is calculated on a time and materials basis with the contractually allowed markups. The full backup is presented to the design team and their consultants for review to determine whether the numbers are correct or reasonable. Work that's compensated after the work is done is tracked by the owner's on-site representative to make sure that if 10 hours were being billed for, 10 hours of work was required to do it.
So the, besides all the rules and regulations that you've cited, the oversight is also by our project management team.
That's correct.
On whether that dollar amount is justifiable.
That's correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if we did decide to make that as some sort of capital item, would we have the ability to hire someone else at not prevailing wage, or would that be?
No, it's a public project.
Okay, so it would have to be prevailing wage regardless.
Right.
And again, I want to have nothing but nice things to say about the development team. Just with any project, they give their price and we can either take it or leave it. With any project I do myself, I like to get 2 estimates as anybody would, but again, they do good work. Their price may seem a little high, but you get what you pay for, and they do good work, so.
If I may ask, is there any sequence that requires this be voted on now, like we did with the electrical? I mean, is there parts of the building that we can't move this at a future date in the project, not outside the project, but in the project?
I think basically at this point, the only reason we are asking the committee to consider it at this time is that in order to get in to remove the existing murals, the goal was to do it during break when there's no students in the building. And so from a standpoint of giving the committee time to discuss and vote on it, which is why it's been kind of discussed a few months in a row, but to give us the authority to go in and at least capture the images and remove the existing murals while there's no students in the building. That was the goal.
Any other questions from the committee?
Mr. Chair. No,
sorry.
please.
If we were to hold off on voting tonight, is there a reason that couldn't be done during our April break? Is that too late? Will there not be the right people on site to do it?
That's a little later than we would like to, since we're turning it
I
does
know, we want
involve
to move
installing
in,
them
6
into
weeks
the new
after
building.
that, so.
And we will be completing finishes about that time, but it's not out of the realm of possibilities.
Mr. Chair, is there somebody here on anybody in this room who wants to speak to this, in favor of this, aside from the people on the board? I mean, I'd love to hear, for those people, since this is on TV and people wanted to know, so some people on the committee, some people on the extended committee, the guests here, and if they have opinions, a lot of people haven't heard our meetings, this would be a good chance for you to tell people in general who are watching why this is proposed.
Mr. Spadafino.
Thank you. a few months ago, our students, had come and they wanted, especially that Whalen Park mural. That was something that they felt real strongly about, and it was a tie to the past that they were hoping would come with them into the new building. I know, and I've heard from some alumni, not all alumni, but some alumni that were, while we know it's a new generation, new memories, there was still this thought of taking some stuff with them. That this community, we didn't want to bury the past with the building. That there were things that they wanted to take with them. And one of those things was the mural, and then there were several other murals that we went through a process on. We voted on murals, we voted on logos, and students did this in their advisories. We had 4 that came out on top that we were looking to reproduce, and then the one that the students, as an AP class a few years ago, put together, and that was the Whalen Park one. So those were the ones that were real. There were only so many that we could take. There was, we went through a process very early on where we looked at taking, how many did we want? Did we want 1, 2, 3, 10? Where would they fit? So we went through a process with the architects, and we came to a reasonable number being 4. And that was the process that we used to get to the 4 that we had, plus the Whalen Park mural. I think as we're hearing everybody's voices, the voice of the students too, I hope would be taken into account, because they felt strongly about these, and that's why I'm up here talking about them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Luck.
Phyllis Luck, 50 Sunset Lane. Would it be possible to take a digital picture of the Whalen Park mural and save that and have it go to the new school digitally like the rest of them?
Is it possible? Of course.
Okay, so then you could save that $8,000. Or it's $10,000, right? And then you could do fundraisers if the students really they could fundraise.
Mr. Chair?
Sir.
I'll make a couple of comments. First of all, since the Whalen one is actually it's the actual artwork that's going to be saved, I believe that since that is the only piece of actual artwork that I understand is to be saved or to be preserved and brought to the new school, I wouldn't want all of it to be just digitized. I mean, and there's something to the value of art to begin with, and there's something to the value of the history of the building. There's a value to aesthetics in general. I mean, I'm sure we could have gotten gray tile and put gray tile all over the building and saved $15,000. There are reasons you make certain decisions. Some of them are aesthetic, some of them are historic, some of them are memorialized. To me, this makes sense. If I had to offer, and I will offer, a compromise to this, would be to move the existing artwork of the Whalen mural and only digitize the rest of them, because those can be printed at a later date and we can put them the size we want and where we want later. But certainly, I would urge the committee to support the moving of the one piece of artwork that we've gotten the request for, that is a tie-in of the past to the future. There is a value to that goes beyond $10,000 in my mind. People on the committee can certainly vote to not agree with that, but certainly that's the way I feel. It's not everything in the world is about price. Some things are about more than that, and it is about a continuum that the new building should bring, to the degree we can, and to the degree it's been asked for, into the future. And so I certainly would support this, and I would offer the amendment that we authorize moving the Whalen mural and digitizing the rest with no printing of the digital reproductions until a later date if somebody wants to support printing that, because we can do that at any point. I would offer that as an amendment.
Is there a second to that amendment?
I would second that.
So the new amendment now reads that we're going to approve the replacement, the move of the Whalen, and I'm assuming, Mr. Hurst, that would mean that the not to exceed would be somewhere around $10,000?
Mr. Chair, that's not exactly what I understood. I understood Mr. Alonso to say we would digitize all of the murals, we just wouldn't reproduce them.
Right, we would
So we
move the
wouldn't-
Whalen ones and digitally photograph the remainders.
Right, but not print them.
Right, but not print them. So whatever the printing cost is, we can
And
decide at a later day. Right.
Mr. Hurst, you have an idea of what that might be in terms of a cost differential?
If we don't reproduce and install the digital reproduction ones, how much would this not to exceed be reduced?
I would be comfortable with a $10,000 not to exceed to capture the 4 murals and relocate the
Okay,
5th.
so 10,000 it is.
Okay. So that now is the motion on the table. Any other further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
Alrighty. Signatures on that. Solar power for the building. Who's going to address that with us? Mr. Londa? Just a little background for those that are watching. This is not necessarily part of the purview of the building committee. We're not, there's no line item for us except for what we've done to make the building ready to take solar panels, which is already in the plan. So there's no, the discussion around solar planning, the solar panels was that there were some members of the committee that had an interest in what the cost differential would be to purchase and own the panels versus the power purchasing agreement, and what the differential was in terms of, you know, cost benefit and what the impact would be for us.
So I'm going to give you an overview because that's really what I'm able to talk about. I don't think I can get down into a detailed analysis, but to put it in perspective, so we're looking at an approach of putting a 750 kilowatt system on the school, which would be about 50,500 square feet worth of solar panels. This would not provide all the power needed for the school, but it would be a substantial portion of it. We have an advisor working with us based upon receiving a municipal grant for a solar power technical advisor, and they are currently working on a power purchasing agreement proposal that would go out on February 17th. And we'll see if we have anybody interested in providing a quote for that request for proposals. So based upon that 750,000 kilowatt proposed sizing in the power purchasing agreement, RFP, I called and talked to a couple of different vendors about what it would cost to put a comparable system on the school. And the number I'm going to say total would be somewhere around $1.5 million. That would represent the bulk of the cost would be roughly $800,000 in materials, and then the 2 other remaining costs would be split between the labor to install it and an estimated $250,000 in interconnection costs.
Excuse me.
So
is it the 250,000 to get rid of the grid issue, or is that something different?
Yes. But once again, this is very premature because, there has to be an interconnection study done with Unitil to be able to determine those as true costs, but that's the number that we're currently using. The advantages or some of the problems with owning it ourselves currently are that a lot of the incentives to own it we don't qualify for, such as the federal tax credit. We're not able to take advantage of that. The depreciation that other folks would take advantage of when they buy these kind of systems, we also are not able to take advantage of. The one program that we are able to take advantage of is an SREC program, which SREC 2, as I understand it, from talking with the folks I did talk to, we are apparently in, or we either have ended or are in the process of ending SREC 2, and what is to follow will either be some kind of add-on or an SREC 3 program, and we just don't know what that will be, but it's something that the state will develop, and I'm sure there will be an SREC 2 or plus or a 3, but there'll be something that comes on. Currently, SRECs are running around $285 an SREC, which is, one SREC is equivalent of 1,000 kilowatt hours of production. So that's very, very lucrative. That would be the one thing we could take advantage of if that program was still in place. So we really don't know what that value will have in the future. So it's very hard to make an estimate. But the folks I was talking to were thinking that the value of SRECs was going to, on SREC 3, would be lower, that there'd be less incentives, partly because the cost of solar panels is coming down, and so there may be less need to incentivize people to put solar on. So I don't really have a great analysis for you, other than to know that some of the benefits to owning this system that under a power purchasing agreement someone else might be able to take advantage of, we would not be able to take advantage of. That being said, the solar RFP that we're putting out, we're going to put this out. We're going to hopefully get some numbers come back to us. We may wind up having to reject them all if they're not sufficient. Our timing isn't great because we don't have the SREC 3 out there right now, so we're operating in the unknown, and that tends to not favor us when we're operating in the unknown. So if we don't get good numbers on a power purchasing agreement, and that comes down to what we pay per kilowatt hour to the solar developer, we can always hold that, re-energize the RFP in 6, 8, 10 months and send it back out. But we're going to go put it out there. We're going to get some numbers. We'll have at least a reference point, and we'll have to take a look at what those numbers are to be able to make a call on it. But everything I've seen so far really indicates that we should go get a solar array put on it, and the other unknown out there is what happens with our interconnection. Do we get any benefits? Will anything come out of the State House that will help us with that interconnection? Or does this project have to carry that interconnection cost? If it does, it's a big enough project, and it certainly looks like it could carry that. So that's where we are with solar.
Any questions from the committee?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. That 1.5 million includes the 250K interconnection?
Yeah, so that was materials, labor, and interconnection costs. And like I said, but that's, a good ballpark. I did speak with a couple of different folks, and both of them gave me that same general.
And roughly the life of that project would be 20 years, like the life of the typically?
If we did a power purchasing, we'd do it for 20 years, and we probably have at least 5 more years on the panel.
Okay.
But anything we did would continue to operate. We wouldn't contract probably for more than 20 years on a power purchasing agreement, but the technology continues to change, and whether we wind up with an inverter or whether there's microinverters, I guess that'll something we also will get out of this power purchasing agreement RFP.
I guess the number I'm looking for is if we paid to put the thing on ourselves over the 20 years, what would our return be?
I can come up with a number.
Well, that would be the benefit to the return.
Yeah,
on investment.
it's just hard, like I said, because we really don't know what
some sort of maintenance, but I think it would be minimal. I know the town had signed an agreement with Nexamp, and they're giving us 25%. I can't see how the maintenance would Why wouldn't we just keep the other 80% or the other 75% and just do the maintenance ourselves?
Well, like I said, the incentives are substantial, and that's what makes these projects go. So, like I said, we don't really have a number for what SRECs would be worth, but it's significant, and at 1.5 million, if you're not getting SRECs at 8 cents or 12 cents a kilowatt hour, you have a lot of production. So I can do some estimates on it, but like I said, there is a big unknown, which is this SREC. And in fact, like I said, that we're not able to take advantage of the other substantial incentives.
What was you provided this analysis anyway, but what was the savings with a PPA that you had estimated if we were charged? So
the PPA, the analysis we had was based upon an 8 cent per kilowatt hour.
And we would save how much?
It was like 3 million over the course of a 20-year PPA, as compared to 5 million spent for electricity overall for the building. So it was a substantial,
I'm just trying to
60%.
Yeah, I'm just trying to calculate what Mr. Bittner's.
And would the would the upfront cost for the PPA still be $250,000? Because we still would have to address the grid issue regardless of, to accommodate a PPA, no matter what, we would have to fix the grid issue to put any kind of system on, correct?
Well, that would have to get resolved.
Right, but if we're going to do a PPA and the company's going to own it and pay for us, they pay it.
It's going to be in their rate.
Back, but it would still be
and if we, and like I said, we kind of figured that in as 250,000 on the 1.5 million.
The only reason, I'm just trying to quickly in my head calculate it. It would be good, because the 8 cents that you estimated that we would be paying on the PPA, we wouldn't even be paying that if we owned it. So you could.
So 750 kilowatt system would generate about a million kilowatt hours in a year. And depending what rate you use on electricity, I think you'd probably be somewhere close to 21 cents a kilowatt hour. So my guess is it would pay for itself eventually, yes, and maybe around year 9 or 10.
Right. And then my understanding about SREC 2, I don't know about enrollment, but I mean, certainly it's in effect for another 8 years at least. So, I mean, it would, again, I've been a big proponent of looking into it too. I mean, there is the upfront cost is that you have the payment, but I think even the use of electric may, regardless of the SREC program, may wind up being worthwhile because you own, you're not paying any cents per kilowatt hour. You're just, everything that's generating, you're getting.
And to take into account the rates will raise over, I mean, I'm sure over the next 10 years, our electric rate will rise, and if we own it, then we don't have to deal with the rate raise either.
But you know my feeling about this. I've said it many times.
Thank you.
FF&E bid update. This is for the committee's information.
Hello again, Jen Littlefield from TAP-A Architects. I think you should have a copy of just a summary of where we stand at the moment with the FF&E purchasing process. We received the bids in a few weeks ago. We've been in the process of evaluating all of the numbers with the superintendent and the other administrators. And at the moment, if you look at near the bottom of the right column, you'll see the MSBA allowance amount is $984,000, and where we currently stand at the moment, we're about $20,000 above that amount. However, we are still evaluating some alternates that were proposed, and we'll be seeing some samples to do our due diligence to make sure that, in the end, what we end up buying is appropriate for the use of the school. So we anticipate that process to go on for maybe through next week, and then we should have some final numbers and continue with the purchasing process. But all in all, I think we're pretty happy with what we've got, and most of it is what we specified exactly, and as I said, we have a few alternates that we're reviewing currently to bring it more in line with the MSBA budget.
Also, just as a quick update for the technology, that, this is just the furnishings, loose furnishings part. The technology part of the FF&E purchasing, we just released the bid package, I think last week on that. So again, we'll have a few weeks where that will be out to bid, and then we'll get those numbers in and do the same evaluation with those vendors. So we'll have an update again.
Mr. Chair, for the people at home, can we tell them what FF&E is?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So basically all the loose furniture that goes in the building, the desks, the chairs, teacher desks and chairs, and
The definition that we were told is if you turn the building upside down, it's the stuff that falls out.
There you go.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I did have a question. I did receive an email from a resident, I believe Mrs. McQuaid had reached out to you as well at some point. Just for the record, she did have questions about the greenhouse, and she was wondering if there was storage and/or tables for that allotted in this? Or?
There are, and that's actually part of the base building contract. Okay. So they were not included as part of this budget. They are included, however, in the base building. Okay. And there are tables and storage with storage underneath them in there.
Right, and I know she was told it would be part of phase 2. Just, do you have an idea of when that information may come out so I can inform her if she wants to come to a meeting?
As far as what they look like or what's included there?
What the timing is on phase 2. We're still working on that.
We're still working on that. Okay. Jonathan could probably
it's
speak
not
to
within
that.
The next couple. I just want to let her know when she should be aware of when it's going to come up so she can attend the meeting.
I'm sure by next meeting we should have a phase 2 plan, right?
I think that's sort of the goal, right? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Is your objective then to close this gap?
That is the goal, yes. Yep, so we are evaluating with actual physical samples. The teachers will get to sit in them again and see, make sure that the alternates that we're looking at are appropriate. And in that, this what you see here is sort of the worst case or, more as specified. So if we do accept some of these alternates, we're pretty confident we can get it right back in line with the MSBA budget.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Question. Just process. This was all, I'm assuming this list was generated way back when in meetings with the staff. Is that kind of how we did that?
With the staff and the administrators, yeah.
Okay. It just seemed, so I guess that answers my question. I guess I'll just make a general comment. None of this stuff is transferring from the old building, or we've deemed it to be inappropriate that maybe if there's, or maybe we don't have some of this. I'm just saying, there's a lot of like cleaning things and music things, and I just would have expected maybe just as a layperson that
I think there are a number of things that are being moved over, and this
a very expensive pencil sharpener. I did highlight that.
It does include delivery and installation into the building, so there's a slight upcharge. You can't just go to home, Staples.
Yeah, I understand. But I guess so. The process was just I'm just assuming this was all pretty well vetted. These are all things that are not transferred.
We did spend a number of meetings with the administrators and even the individual staff members. They all had a say of what they felt was appropriate for the new equipment that they need in the building. They've also been working with John and Jocelyn Lesser to figure out what could be moved over as well.
Okay.
So it's sort of.
So I guess the point is, this list has been the list since the beginning of the project.
Since the beginning,
okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just to also talk about things that are being repurposed, we have kitchen equipment that's coming from TCP to the new kitchen because it's in fairly good condition. So there is equipment that is being repurposed. Okay, that was for informational purposes. Construction project update. Ms. Knox.
Just one comment we missed. We need to vote on Amendment 10.
I'm sorry?
Amendment 10, it's under commitments.
Did I miss something?
Right, it's already something we've approved. It's for the additional services for cooling. It's just an actual document.
I'm sorry, you're right.
Just so that I can get signatures and Tape can charge us, bill us for that.
You want to present that?
Yes, it's on.
My apologies.
It is. It is.
29, I think.
It's page 27 through page 29. So last meeting, we've approved additional services to design a cooling system for the building, so that we can understand the actual cost. It was for $6,600. Tapei has done their job. They've issued an RFP that's currently being priced. And this is just the amendment on page 27, the amendment cover for the MSBA and for the, just a contract update, so that, for that amount, for $6,600 to Tapei's contract. The amount was approved, so.
Are there any questions?
Just want to ask one question. So the result of this design work will give us a specific number for the cooling, which we now have a placeholder for $500,000. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But this in no way commits us to that
Correct.
cooling system.
Correct.
This is just for the design and specification work?
Right. We have a placeholder number that we want a better number on, so the committee is looking at an actual number.
Also, before we talked about this design, you can keep this building, even if it doesn't get approved at the moment, you can keep the design for future, because the building is equipped with future expansion, so you can put it to that and do it at a later time.
Any other questions? I'll take a motion.
So moved?
Second.
I think that was a move to approve.
Move to approve?
Yes.
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Opposed? Thank you. Now we get to the fun part.
Should I take the microphone?
Sure.
That would be good.
Just unclip it at the bottom there. There you go.
Right, I'll try to be quick. So I will not go through each bullet point, but generally the building is about 79% complete. Permanent lighting systems are being turned on area by area. Area A, B, and D are on, with C remaining to be on. The canopy metal, roof detailing, and asphalt shingles and roof edge metal installation are ongoing in terms of the exterior of the building. Installation of light poles are complete on site. They are operational, but they're not turned on. Elevator work is ongoing. Railing installation is ongoing throughout the building, and stairs and auditorium. Bathroom fixture installations are complete throughout the entire building, and also for the locker room, the fixtures are being installed this month. Boilers have been started and operational. Building automation system is at a point-to-point testing, and paging, bell, and security systems are going through point-to-point checkup. In terms of building A, which is the high school wing, there's a high school and a middle school wing. So the high school wing is the most complete. The wood millwork at Media Center, casework, countertops, and plumbing fixtures are done. Wood doors were installed this month. Flooring installation is ongoing, and ceiling installation is ongoing. The ceiling tiles are being installed. So some of the images, that's just looking into the high school wing corridor. You can see the wood doors and the ceiling tiles and lighting. This is looking into the teacher spaces that is in the core, in the center core of the building. Some interior of the teacher spaces with the storage, storage cubbies and the lighting, the flooring. This is the science lab in the high school wing. You can see the countertops, the casework, the fixtures are installed. Those are tables that will be going into the science labs, the rolling tables. This is the collaborative space that it's in the high school wing. There's two of them. So one is in the high school, one is in the middle school. This is the media center. The library lighting and millwork, the counter space is installed, the interior glass is installed. There are some display cases that are installed. Flooring is yet to be installed in that space. This is looking into the common corridor between the two wings. So the library is on this, and the media center is on the right, and the collaborative space is on the left. A lot of the tile work is ongoing. Lighting installation, ceiling, again, all underway. And buildings B and C, there is a lot of the same. Essentially, the most things that are complete is the duct and the remaining sprinkler installations. The tile installations and corridors are ongoing, nearly complete. In the auditorium ceiling, the platform, the temporary platform was removed, so now you can see into the ceiling. The ceiling was installed, lighting was installed, the house lighting was installed, not the theater lighting. Framing is actually being installed now on the masonry walls. The gym, most of the athletic equipment is in, the painting was in, and what else? The speakers and the power, the permanent power. Actually, the permanent light fixtures are on. So this is looking into a lower corridor. I believe this is a media lab, a graphics lab, I think, graphics lab. This is the upper corridor going on the first floor, and you can also look into the second floor and the skylights. Looking towards middle school wing. A lot of the millwork is going on in the common spaces. This is the millwork that's in the reception area, which would be the admin space next to the entrance to the middle school, the main entrance. Actually, yes, middle school. Admin offices, painting, lighting are done. Classroom. Second floor, a lot of the tile work, the railings, the skylights. Also, second floor, the common area between the two wings. This is looking into, this wall is actually the gym would be on the left. So the lighting was installed, and these are acoustical panels that were installed. They're kind of perforated wood look to them. Tile work, benches. This is looking into the auditorium stage. So this is the ceiling. Before we had a platform that was staged there. So now it's all revealed, and walls are being framed. Again, looking into from the stage into the seating. This is the control booth. The gym. Permanent lighting is on, the fixtures, the basketball hoops, all that stuff is in. Just a view into the mechanical room. It's getting fuller and fuller every month with all the equipment. Locker rooms, permanent lighting and painting, not payment. Building D, I'll just show you pictures. This is cafeteria. The lighting was installed in the cafeteria. Tile is ongoing. Another view, light fixtures with tile. This is the kitchen and the servery. Epoxy flooring is in. Those are the built-in refrigerators and the hood and the paint. This is tile that's all done. This is just a nice view of the cafeteria from outside. You can see it from both sides of the building, which I thought was really nice, seeing the light fixtures. This is a corridor coming out of the cafeteria, looking into the high school, going towards high school wing. The collaborative space of the middle school. Corridor of middle school, the floor wasn't covered, it was just installed, so that was a good image of what the floor pattern is going to look like. Right now you can't see it because it's all covered and protected. The middle school science lab, and we're done. Thank you. Questions?
Any questions from the committee? We did do another tour at 3:30 this afternoon, and it really is, it's the high point of my week to see the progress that's going on, and to see that that we remain completely on schedule, and I know at the end of the day we'll be under budget. So I think the project is going very, very well. Any public comment? Sir.
Three different areas, and I'll start with you if you don't mind. I thought I heard that you said that with regard to the $500,000 for the air conditioning, you would be appropriating $6,000 to do an analysis of really what it would cost to cool that area. And I thought I heard you say that there are already in place electrical outlets so that this would be, we could accommodate this at a later date. Am I correct?
The building was designed to accept the new cooling when we designed it. We took during the design phase, we didn't do that additional cooling as part of the base bid because we were looking at cost savings to keep the number at about 72 million. That was the goal of the school building committee at that point when they were going through the design phase. What we did say was, let's make sure that we can put it in at a later date if we can find the money to do it.
Okay. Specifically, do we have the ability to hook up the air conditioning, so-called, with electrical outlets in that area so we could do it at a later date? That's what I
don't think it's the electrical, it's the HVAC. Jonathan would be a better person to speak.
Okay.
The electrical work to support the additional cooling is not installed at this time. It could be installed without installing the rooftop equipment.
Right.
So the work could be done in part or whole. But specifically, the structure of the building was designed to receive this additional rooftop equipment without having to go in and bring additional steel. So that was what was made the building ready to receive it. Okay. But the additional mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, mechanical and electrical work was not done at that time.
Okay. It seems that we're going down this road, and I just wanted to make sure I understood what was happening. The other question I had, Miss, for the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, you mentioned that you went out to bid, and I wondered if you went out to bid to companies in the area that are known to repurpose modular furniture and that sort of thing, and they do it on a large scale basis, and then they repurpose this and then they sell it. Has that been considered, and if not, why not?
So actually, no, we did not pursue that option. As far as what the school's desires were, we have a brand new school. We want to create a space that encourages the new learning ideas and goals for the staff and administrators. And I think that we proposed new furniture that meets all of our expectations and our desires to provide a good quality product for the school that will last a long time. And we have no issues with the brands that we've recommended to the school to purchase.
I understand. So. Okay. I understand what you just said, but I think it's important for everybody to understand that there are a couple of companies in this area, and that's all they do is repurpose this, and it's like brand new stuff at a substantial savings. And I just wondered if it was part of the process. That's all. I'm disappointed that it wasn't, but life goes on. John, I've got a question for you, and I know a lot's going on, but listening to you talk about the solar aspects, I can't help but think, why wasn't this part of the design phase?
So in the design phase, this is actually very much like the cooling. In the design phase, we designed areas that would be able to accept solar panels, and we didn't buy any racking, and we didn't buy any solar panels, but we did create space in the electrical room for an inverter. We did have conduits going to the roof, and so that's the extent of what it was designed, and with the idea that, that we would get solar at some point. The cooling is very similar. We have air handlers on the new building. In fact, we have air handlers at the primary school exactly the same way, where they have both a heating coil and a cooling coil. And so the new school currently has the heating coils working, and I know they're getting ready to test all the air flows through those. But we also have the cooling coils in there as well. Of course, we don't have anything to attach to the cooling coils, which is the same situation we currently have at the primary school. When we built that school in 2005, we put in the heating coils and we put in the cooling coils. And we designed that school the same way, with the potential to add cooling at some point. Now we're 10 years down the road. We haven't added it, mostly I think for a lack of resources, but so that's why you're seeing this. So there's some initial design work that was done up front, and at some point you decide to go do it, and the question always is how do you fund it?
Yep. Okay, so the short answer is, I get from this, is that plans have been made for this long-term so that we can adapt it, and if we decide for whatever reason to do that, we're a fair amount down the road so that we could accomplish that.
That's correct. And with the solar, like I said, we have done, with the Turkey Hill Middle School, we did use a power purchasing agreement to get solar panels on there.
Yep.
We have 106 kilowatts on that roof, and that saves us about $10,000 every year. And that one was a 15-year power purchasing agreement. So in 11 more years, we'll own that system, and we'll get another 10 years of use. Power production, we'll own it outright.
Okay. The review of the construction process and progress was very informative, and I garnered from it that there are a lot of very high ceilings, and in those ceilings are the lights to illuminate the areas. Have we provided for equipment so that we can change those lights when and if we have to?
So in the FF&E, I had to consider whether or not we should include, a high lift.
Yeah.
And we did not. We took that out. And the reason being is we've gone to LED lights, which, if we obviously had fluorescence or obviously we wouldn't have incandescents. But if we had those things, it might have been more of an issue. But with LEDs, we shouldn't be up there changing lots of light bulbs. It's LEDs. It should be long-term.
What's long-term, John?
Oh, like 20 years.
Oh, give me a break.
Well,
seriously? 20 years for light bulbs?
Well, they're not light bulbs. They're LEDs. However, recently I had to change out a fixture at the high school gym. We had a 400-watt high-intensity discharge lamp that went out just as we moved into the basketball season, so I had to rent a lift for a 19-foot lift. It was $260. They brought it in at 8 o'clock in the morning, and at 12 o'clock we were done. He took it away. So when I looked at that, I knew this was going to cost in the thousands of dollars to buy, and at $250 a pop, we probably just rent it.
Okay.
So we looked at the cost, and if I had bought it, then we have to store it.
Yeah.
So and then I have to maintain it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of reasons why it may not make sense to own a lift, and that the best approach might be truly to just rent one.
That's fine. It's your call, but I just tell you, from a layman's point of view, there's a lot of high ceilings in that building, and I said, boy, this long-term. Last question for you. And currently, what's the square foot cost to maintain the existing high school, and what's the projected square foot cost to maintain the new building?
I can talk to you about utility costs
Yeah.
in that realm. So for electricity is one of the big ones, because
Yeah,
electricity is a premium fuel. We currently are using about $3 of worth of electricity per square foot a year.
Yep.
And the new school is going to use about 5.
Okay.
So that's one of the ones that's going to go up substantially.
Sure.
Natural gas costs, the heating costs will come down substantially, like about 50%, roughly 50%. And that's because we've got a building that's going to be tight. So that's one that, the school committee looked at me and said, John, this is not a good number. You need to add more just in case it's not right. So
Sure.
we did add additional, what I would say is a kind of contingency heating funds for the next fiscal year. But I think when we run the building, we'll get a good baseline identified and know where we are. But those utility costs are our biggest cost per square foot, and that's
Sure.
when we track very closely. Every month we track costs for every building on those very important utility costs.
Okay. Last question, then I'll sit down. It's been very informative. With lockdown requirements and safety requirements being paramount, how is it that we forgot two doors?
Okay, so I can't specifically answer that question, but I will tell you is when we did the initial description of what we wanted for the new middle school, high school, we specifically stated that we wanted to have what we essentially call a man trap. So if you get buzzed in the building, you
Kind of sexist, isn't it?
Well, maybe it is.
Joke, John.
I don't. But the idea that you could come into the building, but that you could go no further, unless somebody lets you go further. And when construction started and doors started to be put in place, that one set that was supposed to have locks on it did not. And it just had regular doors that would swing wide open. So that's why they've gone back, and that's why you saw the cost for
$8,000
for the electric, because it was needed to be in there. It was part of the original concept of what was supposed to be in that, but it wasn't.
Okay, thanks, John. Thank you very much.
Yes.
You all know who I am by now. Can someone tell me what Wenger Music Furniture is and why it costs so much?
So Wenger is the...
Please, the microphone?
Yeah.
Trying to speak to you and everyone. Wenger is the company that provides a lot of the well-known music equipment furnishings. They provide lockers for all the instruments for storage and security. They provide the chairs that all the students use. They have a special chair that music departments prefer to use. Just other assorted equipment pieces. There's large desk sort of stations that the teacher would use to teach from that incorporate a lot of other pieces that aren't normally in just a regular old desk. So basically that is the package for all 3 of the music rooms, for all of the loose furnishings, as well as the built-in, the lockers and the storage also for uniforms. Uniform storage is included there for all of that equipment. So it's a good package. It's a good amount of equipment for the 3 music classrooms, basically to outfit the entire classroom.
I guess I just don't understand why none of this came up when we voted for the budget in the first place. It just seems like all we talked about was the building and not what goes inside. And I understand that there's going to be additional costs, but $103,000 for music equipment or furnishings just seems like a whole lot of money.
This is within the budget of the building. This is not a contingency. Like, this is not extra we're spending. This we're just looking at this.
This is just actual what is bid.
Yeah.
So this was
is
already
not
part of the
This
budget?
was already part of the original.
It's all part of the budget.
When we
All
put
right.
out the total that everyone voted on for the building included all of this. We're just now to the point where we're buying. We didn't buy all the furniture before the building was built.
No, I understand that.
This is not a contingency, like, this is not something we're looking to spend with that contingency money. This is already included.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Luck.
Again, thank you for your indulgence. Carl Luck, 50 Sunset Lane. First, I just want to remind the committee that I'm still looking forward to receiving the information I requested at your last meeting, which is the presumably minutes and documentation from the period when the value engineering discussions happened way back before it was presented to town. So on that line, the committee's referred to several of the items on the contingency wish list as having been value engineered out of the project early on. And I wonder, I quite often wonder, I'm very familiar with the term from my life, but I often wonder how many people really understand what that term means, value engineered. So I went to Wikipedia, and for anybody who out there is still awake and with us, value engineering is a systemic method to improve the value of goods or products and services by using an examination of function. Value, as defined, is a ratio of function to cost. So that's the value, is function to cost. And the value can therefore be increased by either improving the function or reducing the cost. And that's value engineering, and I presume the process that you went through. Regarding the contingency, after the turf field, which we've heard enough about, the next biggest ticket item on the contingency wish list, is the cooling, which got mentioned recently at $500,000, which was value engineered out of the project before submission to the town. The school building committee therefore determined at that time that it did not have a sufficient function to cost ratio to be included in the project. If this ratio hasn't improved, either function increased or cost decreased, or both, I wonder why the decision and the recommendations back then would be any different today than it was when it was prior discussed. I don't believe just having money available and the authority to spend it should have any effect on the initial, and I'm sure well thought out, decision to value engineer that item out. If the function to cost ratio has changed, then I look forward to hearing that, which went up, the function or the cost went down. If not, I don't know why it's being revisited, because you made a good decision at the time, I presume. As for the other items on the current contingency list, they don't even seem to have reached the level of being looked at for inclusion in the initial proposal at all, and therefore never went through any value engineering evaluation phase. Or if they did, perhaps when I get the documentation, I'll see it. So why are they now being considered? Again, is it just because we have money left that we can go look at other nice-to-haves? I have no doubt that this school building committee, and I give you a lot of credit to a man and woman, only wants to get as much value as they can for the schools and the children, and I applaud you for that. But you also have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers who put their trust in you when they overwhelmingly supported this program. Many of our residents cannot afford nice-to-haves, and at this time when they're struggling to fund the rest of the needs of the community and their own quality of life, is not the time to put additional burden on them that could be handled later through some other vehicles if they so see it. Okay. So please, do not abandon the process of testing each item and every wish list item by a vigorous value engineering analysis. Please seriously consider spending little to none of the contingency money and reward the taxpayers for their support by bringing this wonderful new school online for less than the $36 million, the town contribution that they voted for. We would gratefully appreciate it for 30 years to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I did have a question regarding the cooling system. Mr. Londa had said that the primary school had been, it can accommodate the cooling and it hasn't been installed. I guess this would be a question for Mrs. Combs. Who would benefit more from the installation of the cooling, the high school students or the primary students?
You're asking her to choose her children?
I think we have children throughout the district who are asked every day to perform at their highest levels of capacity, and who in every building we have students who have health concerns that we manage relative to extreme heat and make sure they're well taken care of. I can't say. What I can say is every child in this district would benefit from being in a program, in a building where they're not in classrooms where the temperatures are 88 to 90 degrees.
Is there a cost associated with adding it to the primary school? Do we have that number?
Mr. Londa, we put this in a capital plan at one time. Do you have that number?
So, we've discussed this, but we've not put a dollar value on it, and we have not, while we've said this was something that we're interested in, we have not gotten to the point with the capital plan that we have proposed bringing that forward.
Okay. It's just that I don't want you to choose, but there should be some looking into whether, the younger kids would be affected, I would think, more by the heat than the older kids, as far as tolerance and ability to learn, in my opinion.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh,
Sorry,
but it's funny. I didn't mean you to choose, but I just asked you to choose between the two schools.
I have my favorite son, too. I have 3 kids. I have my favorite.
Mrs. Luck.
Well, I had a comment about that. When we built our home, we equipped it so that it could accept air conditioning, but we turned out we didn't need it. So perhaps this school is as well built as you think it is, and it won't need air conditioning. And in the school that I worked in, we had a lot of really big windows, and shades would have helped a whole bunch. I bet shades are a lot less than $500,000.
Yeah, all the rooms have shades.
Oh, so all of the windows are shaded? So I bet that'll help tremendously.
As do the primary school has shades, as does Turkey Hill Middle School have shades.
And they use them on all the windows when it's hot? Great. One thing I wanted to mention, I looked at the agenda and I noticed that under the contingency for discussion, the construction of the replacement maintenance garage, the site digital sign, the cooling system for the classroom wings, and the reconfiguration of the parking lot at Passios were passed over. When will they be discussed?
At the next meeting. There's nothing new to report on those items.
Oh, okay. I thought all of these items were for discussion this evening.
This is a running list of the items.
Oh, I thought the agenda would include what was going to be discussed tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Mackin, but to my point before about the $5,000 that is still listed under RFP 005, the recommendation has been made that be dropped off the list at this point in time from the administration.
That's the parking lot reconfiguration. Is that true?
That's the touchscreen monitor.
Touchscreen, right, yes. Mr. Betancourt.
Yeah, Louis Betancourt again. Just real quick, if I could poll the voting members of the committee of their stance on the athletic field. Is that?
I think it's premature.
Okay, are we?
Yeah, I think it's premature. I think that there's a lot that needed to be digested today. I think people have opinions, but I don't think that a straw vote would be helpful at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question only because one of the public comments had to do with from Mr. Launder about the solar panels on the roof. My understanding was, and please correct me because I wasn't involved at the very beginning with the committee, but those would not have been covered at all by the MSBA anyway.
Correct.
So they were always outside. They weren't in because they were always outside of the scope of the MSBA project and would be totally billed to the town anyway. That's why they weren't really ever part of it.
Correct.
Although the arrangement of the roof so that we could put them on was thought about. I just wanted Mr. Rogers to know that.
And I think that doing those steps is covered by the MSBA.
Yes. Yeah. Well, they don't tell you where you can put stuff on the roof. They kind of.
Okay. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for